Empty pastures. Dust billowed in the wake of Jake's truck, a crimson haze momentarily swallowing the sinking sun. He'd been riding herd on trouble since sunrise, a messy domestic dispute morphing into a tractor theft clear across the county. Harmony Creek was usually a haven of tranquility, but lately, serenity had become a rare gift. He bumped onto the long, gravel drive, the tires singing a familiar song. The ranch house, a sturdy testament to his grandfather's grit, was etched against the vibrant sky. The porch. Lights stuttered, painting elongated, restless shadows. Usually, Thunderbolt and Willow would be waiting, their snouts twitching for a treat or an affectionate scratch. Tonight, the gate stood and a cold fist clenched Jake's insides to kill the engine. The sudden hush amplifying a cricket chorus, a distant mealing cattle. Thunderbolt, Willow, he called, the sound swallowed past the emptiness. Only silence answered. He levered himself out of the truck, his boots crunching on the parched earth. The air carried the scent of sage and dust, a smell that usually soothed him. But tonight, it reeked of foreboding. He surveyed the grounds, the fading light obscuring details. The fence line appeared undisturbed, no telltale gaps. Jake moved toward the gate, his hand drifting instinctively to his sidearm. He wasn't anticipating a confrontation, but years in law enforcement had taught him vigilance. He ran his fingers along the rough-hewn wood, seeking any anomaly, any clue to the horse's vanishing act. Then he noticed it that a stark white rectangle, a jarring intrusion on the weathered wood, fluttered in the evening breeze. An official notice, stamped with a Harmony Glades Homeowners Association emblem, thought Jake's jaw tightened. The HOA. Ever since Sterling Mayfield, a polished city developer, had bought the old Miller Place and erected those soulless houses on the town's fringe, they'd been a constant aggravation. Mayfield envisioned Harmony Creek as a manicured suburb, a world. Apart from the hardy, self-reliant ranching community Jake cherished, he yanked the notice free. The paper crackling like brittle bones. The words jumped out in an impersonal typeface. Notice of abandonment. To Jacob Caldwell. Property address, 147 Willow Creek Road. This letter serves as notification that your property is in violation of Harmony Glades Homeowners Association Bylaw 3.12, which prohibits the keeping of livestock on properties that appear to be abandoned or neglected. Upon inspection, it has been determined that the livestock residing on your property are without adequate care and supervision. Furthermore, the property itself presents a neglected appearance, detracting from the overall aesthetic of the Harmony Glades community. You are hereby given 72 hours from the date of this notice to rectify these violations. Failure to comply will result in the removal of the livestock and the assessment of fines in accordance with HOA Bylaw 7.04. Sincerely, the Harmony Glades Homeowners Association Board. Jake crushed the paper in his fist, the sound a satisfying snap. Abandoned? Neglected? He poured every ounce of himself into this ranch, juggling his sheriff's duties with the ceaseless demands of ranching. The horses were prime examples of health and vitality. Everyone knew that. His gaze swept the pasture once more, a slow burn of anger igniting within him. This wasn't mere bylaw enforcement. That IT was a power play. Mayfield attempting to strong-arm him into selling, paving the way for more cookie cutter dwellings. He stalked toward the house, the gravel grinding fiercely under his boots. He needed to strategize to discern Mayfield's game. The man was known for his ruthlessness, his willingness to twist the rules, even shatter them, to achieve his goals. Inside, the air hung still and cooled. He flicked on the living room light, the sudden illumination embracing the familiar space, the worn leather couch, the splash of color from the Navajo rug, the tableau of framed photographs on the mantelpiece, glimpses of his heritage, his grandfather astride a horse, his parents at a rodeo, a young Jake clutching a fishing rod. These were his anchors, the reasons behind his fight. That he sought the solace of a cold beer in the kitchen. The bottle felt good against his palm. He popped the top and swallowed a long draft, the chill momentarily tamping down his fury. That he needed composure. Clarity, an impulsive move, would play right into Mayfield's hands. That he drifted to the window, his gaze drawn to the vacant pasture, now veiled in darkness. Where were Thunderbolt and Willow? Had Mayfield actually dared to take them? And if so, where had he stashed them? He set the beer down and reached for his phone. Sarah, the vet, was his first thought. She'd been tending his horses for years, knew their quirks like family. Perhaps she'd noticed something, overheard something. He navigated his contacts, his thumb poised over her name. Then his eyes lingered on another name, Deputy Miller. Eager, ambitious, and always ready to assist, he'd expressed interest in learning more about horses. Maybe he'd ventured out to the ranch today. Jake hesitated. Calling Sarah was the sensible course, but the arrogance radiating from the HOA notice, its blatant disregard for the truth, fueled a desire for action, a need to show Mayfield he wasn't someone to trifle with. He tapped Deputy Miller's name and initiated the call. As he waited for the connection, he retrieved the crumpled notice and flattened it on the counter. He scrutinized the words, his eyes hardening. Miller here, the deputy answered, his voice slightly strained. Miller, Jake, did I need you to do something? Anything, Sheriff. Head out to the Harmony Glades development. See if you can locate my horses, Thunderbolt and Willow. They're missing. Missing? I thought they were on your ranch, Sheriff. They should be. They're gone. And I suspect Mayfield and his HOA buddies are involved. A pause hung in the air. Mayfield? You think he took them? I can't say for sure, but I want you to investigate discreetly, flashing the badge. Just see if you can spot them. Maybe someone saw something amiss. Understood, Sheriff. I'm on my way. Jake ended the call, a sense of resolve solidifying within him. He knew this was the opening act. This wasn't just about stolen horses. It was about the very soul of Harmony Creek, the principles he held sacred. He lifted his beer and took another swallow. The cold liquid offered little relief to the inferno raging within. He returned to the window and peered out at the empty expanse. Don't you worry, he murmured, his voice a low promise. I'm coming to get you. Harmony Glades. Whirlwind spun across the baked earth, echoing the chaotic recollections churning in Jake's head. The weathered wood of the porch railing felt reassuringly solid beneath his rough hands. The stolen horses weren't just a livestock loss. It was a theft of Harmony Creek's very soul, a piece of his own identity. Gone missing 2 decades prior, this vista was unbroken. Undulating hills, cloaked in sage and vibrant wildflowers, flowed seamlessly to the horizon. Only the whisper of wind through prairie, grasses, and the mooing of cattle disturbed the profound quiet. Life possessed a stark simplicity, demanding, yes, but uncluttered. Days were filled with fence repairs, tending the herd, and campfire yarns beneath a star-strewn canopy. His father, a man of quiet strength and unyielding principles, instilled in him the sanctity of the land, the importance of fealty, and a harmonious existence with nature's rhythms. He recalled the day his father guided him to the creek, the ranch's life source, as it meandered through their property. This water, the old man rasped, his voice etched with years of sun and wind, is more valuable than any precious metal. Jake, treat it with reverence, and it will sustain you. Now, the creek seemed to shrink daily, strangled by the demands of verdant lawns and overzealous sprinklers a few miles eastward. The initial harbinger was subtle. A surveyor's truck parked on the outskirts of town, followed by hushed talk of a master-planned community poised to inject progress and opportunity into Harmony Creek. Jake brushed it off then. Another ill-fated scheme doomed to wither under the West's uncompromising sun, that he underestimated their resolve. Harmony Glades sprouted. From the desert floor like a deceptive oasis, a shimmering monument to contemporary ambition. Uniform dwellings with impeccably matched facades supplanted the rugged allure of the natural terrain of man-made lakes, sustained by rerouted water, glistened under the unforgiving sun. Verdant golf courses stood as brazen contradictions to the parched grasses that had nourished his family for generations. The HOA, the Harmony Glades Homeowners Association, wielded an iron will cloaked in polite language that promised unity and structure, but delivered rigid conformity and stifling oversight. Regulations burgeoned like noxious weeds, dictating everything from turf height to paint palettes, from mailbox designs to appropriate festive decorations. A creeping disquiet took root as Jake observed the tentacles of Harmony Glades advance, consuming neighboring ranches one by one. Some ranchers capitulated willingly, seduced by the allure of effortless wealth and a leisurely retirement. Others, like Old Man Hemlock, resisted fiercely, only to be ground down by costly lawsuits and escalating property levies. That Hemlock's ranch was the first to fall, then the others followed. Each sale struck Jake as a deeply personal loss. He remembered attending the inaugural HOA assembly, reluctantly accompanying a neighbor desperate to reason with the developers. The community center reeked of synthetic lemon and subdued animosity. Sterling Mayfield, the mastermind behind it all, stood front and center, exuding charisma and self-assurance. That he spoke of boosting property values, fostering a lively community, and ushering Harmony Creek into the 21st century. Jake raised a hand, his voice raspy from lack of use in such gatherings. What becomes of the people who've been here for generations? What happens to our way of life? Mayfield offered a practiced smile, a politician's facade that lacked genuine warmth. Progress necessitates certain sacrifices. Sheriff Caldwell, we're offering equitable market value for your land. This community will generate jobs, improve infrastructure, and secure a brighter future for everyone. The equitable market value, Jake later discovered, was woefully below the land's true worth, especially considering the accompanying water rights. The promised brighter future seemed designed solely to benefit Mayfield and his backers. The chasm between Old Harmony Creek and New Harmony Glades yawned wide. In Harmony Creek, neighbors offered support unconditionally that a handshake sealed agreements, and a person's word held utmost validity. In Harmony Glades, rules and ordinances dictated every interaction. Relationships were transactional, and trust was a scarce commodity. He pondered Mrs. Henderson, his closest neighbor. Her ranch, the Double H, was now a guarded enclave called Equestrian Estates. A bitter irony considering the only horses the residents encountered were faux lawn ornaments she'd been compelled to sell after a string of increasingly absurd HOA violations. A corroded mailbox, rampant foliage, a canine barking past 10 p.m. Jake had aided in her relocation to a cramped apartment in town, a stark departure from the expansive ranch she'd cherished for 7 decades. He detected the sorrow in her gaze, the quiet surrender that accompanied the obliteration of everything she held dear. His own encounters with the HOA had been trifling, until now that a few warnings about his unsightly fencing, a complaint regarding his rooster's early morning serenade, a notice concerning his non-compliant landscaping, that he dismissed them as petty nuisances, that he'd maintained the place well enough for the animals' well-being. But the missing horses and the threat of foreclosure signaled a far more ominous situation. This wasn't about appearances. It was about survival. The sun's relentless heat intensified his indignation. He recalled his father, who had instilled in him a profound reverence for the soil and an unshakable will to defend it. He would not permit Mayfield and the HOA to plunder his heritage. He wouldn't let them extinguish the memory of Harmony Creek. That he straightened from the porch railing, resolution solidifying with each movement. He strode toward the barn, the familiar fragrance of hay and cured leather filling his senses. Duty called. He needed to recover his horses, and he needed to devise a strategy to halt Mayfield before he devoured the remnants of Harmony Creek. The letter of the law may have favored Mayfield, or so it seemed, but Jake firmly believed that justice was a different matter entirely, and as sheriff of Harmony County, he was sworn to deliver. Confrontation. The Harmony Glades HOA office stood as a testament to soulless efficiency. Gleaming surfaces threw back the sun's glare, a stark contrast to the dusty reality Jake usually navigated. His thumbs hooked into his worn belt, the aged leather a rebellious counterpoint to the reception desk's pristine sheen. The air conditioning droned, a mechanical monotone that grated on the ears. Behind the desk, a young woman sporting a smile that seemed more practiced than genuine, her gaze equally distant, inquired, May I help you? Her name tag read Tiffany. I need to see Richard Sterling, Jake announced, his voice roughened by sun and grit. Tiffany's smile tightened a fraction. Do you have an appointment scheduled? No, tell him Sheriff Caldwell is here. He'll find time for me. The title worked its magic. A fleeting unease flickered across her features before she regained her composure. One moment, Sheriff. She buzzed the intercom, murmured a few words, then reluctantly gestured towards a corridor lined with uniformly closed doors. Mr. Sterling will see you now. Last door on the right. Sterling's office was easy enough to locate. Its entrance, a solid expanse of dark mahogany, stood out against the beige monotony like an expensive jewel in a pauper's collection. Forsaking formalities, Jake pushed the door open and entered. Sterling, phone glued to his ear, sat behind a desk that could have been accessioned from a museum, all polished wood and Baroque detailing. His face was floored, his voice a thunderous roar. I don't care what the zoning board dictates. We'll bury them in litigation for years. That's correct, years. Now execute the plan. He slammed down the receiver, his eyes blazing with contained fury. He betrayed no surprise at Jake's presence. Caldwell, he greeted, his voice instantly transforming into a smooth, civil veneer. What an unexpected delight. What brings you here today? Jake offered no reciprocal pleasantries. My horses, Sterling, where are they? Sterling leaned back, tinting his fingers. Horses? I'm quite certain I don't comprehend. Yet a single bead of perspiration snaked down his temple, a chink in his carefully constructed armor. Don't insult my intelligence. They vanished from my property that I have reason to believe this association is involved. Sterling chuckled, a low, dismissive sound. Sheriff, surely your time is better spent than fretting over a few wandering animals that we simply impounded them. They were grazing on HOA property, a flagrant breach of regulations. They were on my land, Jake countered, his tone hardening. And those weren't simply animals. They're registered, branded livestock. You were well aware of their rightful owner. Unattended land, Sheriff, a visual blight. Do we strive to maintain a certain standard here in Harmony Glades? Your rustic ambience clashes with that ideal. A sneer touched Sterling's lips. Jake advanced towards the desk, his sheer presence shrinking the spacious room. The air conditioning seemed to sputter, unable to alleviate the sudden rise in pressure. So you seize my horses, declared my land neglected, and you imagine you're in the right? The HOA acted within its mandate. Sheriff, you received ample notification regarding the infractions. You elected to disregard them, that we adhere to protocol. Sterling's eyes narrowed. Or perhaps you were too preoccupied playing frontiersman to read your correspondence. I received no such notification. Jake stated, his jaw clenched. IT was a convenient bending of the truth. Official-looking letters had arrived, true, but they were invariably consumed by junk mail, and old Earl usually fed the whole mess to the stove unread. He had dismissed them then. Now, those oversights were costing him dearly. Ignorance is no excuse, Sheriff, Sterling said, his smile a cruel, razor-thin line. The horses were auctioned off this morning. The words landed with the force of a physical blow. Jake's fists clenched, battling the urge to obliterate the smugness etched on Sterling's face. Those animals weren't mere possessions. They were a legacy, a tangible link to his father and grandfather sold. Vanished, the thought burned like a brand seared into his soul. Auctioned, he repeated, his voice a guttural rumble. Without any direct attempt to notify me, fully aware of my ownership, reasonable efforts were made, Sterling countered, his voice losing a degree of its earlier bravado. He sensed the shift in Jake, the barely leashed fury lurking beneath the surface. Besides, the proceeds will go to benefit the community, a mutually beneficial arrangement. Wouldn't you agree? You stole them, Jake said, each word a deliberate, weighted blow. You stole them and sold them. That's grand larceny, Sterling. Even in this gilded cage, that remains a crime. Are you issuing threats, Sheriff? Sterling's eyes widened slightly, a tremor now detectable in his tone. I'm stating unequivocal facts. Jake leaned in closer, his gaze unwavering and intense. Those horses are mine, that I intend to retrieve them, By any means necessary. Sterling scoffed, attempting to retrieve his scattered composure. You possess no evidence. The HOA conformed to regulations. Everything is perfectly above board. Legalistic doesn't equate to just Sterling. You hide behind your rules and your lawyers, but you know what you did was repugnant. You exploited an old man, presuming he lacked the will to retaliate. I acted in the interests of the community, Sterling insisted, his voice escalating. You're clinging to the past, Caldwell. This is progress. This is the future. Harmony Glades embodies the future. There's no place for your relics of a bygone era. My relics are the foundation upon which this town was built, Jake retorted, his tone dripping with disdain. Your future is constructed on avarice and a callous disregard for everything that truly counts. He straightened, his gaze sweeping across the opulent office. The trappings of Sterling's success he saw not abundance, but a hollow void at a man possessing everything, yet understanding the value of nothing. I will find those horses, Sterling, Jake declared, turning towards the exit. And when I do, you will rue the day you dared to breathe the same air as Harmony Creek. He didn't wait to hear a reply. He turned on his heel and left the office, leaving Sterling seated at his grandiose desk, the hum of the air conditioning now resembling a frantic, pleading whine. Outside, the sterile air felt fresher, the dust and sun a welcome, familiar embrace. He had a mission ahead, seeking counsel. The bell above the door to Jenkins and Klein jangled a cheerful tune that felt jarringly out of place in Jake's current mood. Sunlight streamed through the large front window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and reflecting off the polished brass nameplate. He wiped a hand across his brow, the grit of the day clinging to his skin. Harmony Creek was a small town, but Sarah Jenkins ran a tight ship. Her office was a bastion of order in a world that increasingly felt chaotic that he found Sarah in. Her usual spot, perched behind a towering stack of legal documents. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe bun, highlighting the sharp angles of her face that wire-rimmed glasses perched on her nose, magnifying her intense brown eyes. She looked up as he entered, a flicker of surprise quickly replaced by a warm smile. "Jake, what brings you to my humble abode?" she asked, her voice a melodic counterpoint to the sterile office environment. "I need your help, Sarah," he said, cutting straight to the chase. He pulled up a chair, the leather creaking in protest. The scent of old books and lemon polish hung heavy in the air, a comforting aroma that usually eased his anxieties. Today, it did little to calm the storm brewing inside him. He recounted the events of the previous day, the anger simmering just beneath the surface of his voice. He described his confrontation with Sterling, the callous indifference in a man's eyes, the gut-wrenching realization that his horses were gone. He spared no detail, laying bare the injustice he felt. Sarah listened intently, her expression growing increasingly grim as he spoke. She tapped a pen against her teeth, a habit she had when deep in thought. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair, the leather groaning again. "That son of a bitch," she said, her voice low and dangerous. It was a rare outburst from the usually composed lawyer, and Jake found a strange comfort in it. "So what can I do?" he asked, his voice tight. Sarah sighed, removing her glasses and rubbing the bridge of her nose. "Legally, it's complicated. HOAs have a lot of power, especially when it comes to enforcing their regulations, but what Sterling did, it's likely illegal. Abandonment requires a very specific set of circumstances, and a sheriff's horses grazing on your own land definitely doesn't qualify. The fact that they auctioned them off without proper notification is another major red flag. So we can get them back." Hope, fragile but persistent, flickered within him. "Maybe," Sarah said, her tone tempering his optimism. "It won't be easy, Jake. Sterling has deep pockets and a team of lawyers at his beck and call that he'll fight this tooth and nail. And frankly, he's probably counting on you not being able to afford a protracted legal battle." Jake clenched his fists. "He doesn't know me very well, then." "I know," Sarah said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. "But knowing and proving are two different things in a courtroom that will need evidence, Jake. Paperwork, witnesses, anything that can show the HOA acted improperly." I have the HOA bylaws, and a few neighbors saw the horses grazing that I can talk to them. Jake offered, already mentally cataloging potential allies. Good at that start, it will also need to track down who bought the horses. That could be tricky. Sterling probably made sure the auction was discreet. Damn it, Jake muttered, running a hand through his hair. The task ahead felt daunting, almost insurmountable. Sarah leaned forward, her gaze locking with his. Look, Jake, I'm not going to lie to you. This is going to be a tough fight, but I believe you have a case. And I believe that what Sterling did was wrong, that you're not just fighting for your horses, you're fighting for everyone in Harmony Creek who's being squeezed by that HOA. She paused, her eyes softening. Besides, she added with a wry smile, I've been itching for a good fight lately. Sterling's been throwing his weight around for too long. Someone needs to take him down a peg. Jake felt a surge of gratitude, a warmth spreading through him that chased away some of the chill of the past day. So you'll help me? Of course I will, Sarah said, her voice firm. Consider Jenkins and Klein officially on the case. But be warned, Jake, this won't be cheap. Even at my friend rate. Jake swallowed hard. He knew Sarah wasn't doing this for the money. She genuinely cared about justice, about righting wrongs. But legal fees were legal fees. I don't have a lot of cash on hand, he admitted, feeling a flush of embarrassment creep up his neck. But I can offer, I don't know, ranch work? I can fix fences, mend saddles. Sarah laughed, a genuine, hearty laugh that filled the office. Jake, you're offering to pay your lawyer in manual labor? That's surprisingly charming. But no, thank you, I'm terrible with animals, and the last time I tried to hammer a nail, I almost took off my thumb. She tapped her pen against the desk again, her brow furrowed in thought. Tell you what, we'll figure out a payment plan. Something we can both live with. The important thing is that we get started right away. First things first, we need to file a temporary restraining order to prevent Sterling from selling or transferring ownership of any of the horses. What about the horses that were already sold? Jake asked, his stomach twisting with renewed anxiety. We'll deal with that as we go point one step at a time. Finding them is a priority, but securing the others is crucial to preventing further loss. That will also need to draft a formal complaint outlining the HOA's violations of due process and their breach of fiduciary duty. Sarah stood up, her energy radiating outwards. All right, Sheriff, she said, her eyes glinting with determination. Let's get to work. Tell me everything you know about that auction. Who organized it? Who attended? Any idea where the horses might have ended up? Jake stood as well, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead was still long and arduous, but he no longer felt alone. He had Sarah in his corner, a formidable ally with a sharp mind and a fierce heart. And that, he knew, made all the difference. He pulled up another chair, closer to Sarah's desk, and began to recount everything he could remember, every detail, no matter how small, that might help them reclaim what was rightfully his. The setting sun cast long shadows across the office, but inside, a new dawn was breaking. The fight had begun, gathering evidence. The afternoon sun stretched amber fingers across the scarred floor of Jake's barn office. He wrestled with towers of documents, each page a potential salvation. Inoculation certificates, grain bills, anything to substantiate his claim to the horses, to prove their well-being, to refute any notion of abandonment. Dust motes, caught in the sunbeams, mimicked the nervous energy fizzing beneath Jake's outwardly composed demeanor. Damn it, he muttered, hunting for a solid piece of proof, something undeniable to shove in Sterling's gloating face. The impending auction hung over him, a predatory bird circling the ranch. He unearthed a file marked Equine Care, 2022 to 2023. Inside, Doc Henderson's fastidious records offered a glimmer of hope. Vaccinations, parasite control, routine examinations. Each sheet testified to diligent husbandry. A tight smile touched Jake's lips. At least the old vet was thorough. He devoured the entries, highlighting crucial data with a heavy marker. Dates, treatments, even notes on individual horses' personalities. This was promising. Truly promising. That a second box, shoved in a dim corner, yielded receipts from Miller's feed. Flipping through them, his spirits plummeted. Many were ghosted by time, indecipherable, that a curse escaped his lips. He should have been more meticulous. He should have anticipated. Sterling, the Viper. Yet buried amongst the faded slips, he discovered a trove of recent invoices, substantial orders, specifically for premium forage and feed. More fuel for his fight. That a rap at the doorway startled him. Jazz Du Bois stood framed in the bright opening, a silhouette etched with decades under the sky. Every line on his face whispered of experience gleaned from the land, his customary garb. Time-faded denim, a flannel shirt softened with age, and a ball cap shading his eyes. "Sheriff," Jazz rumbled, his voice like gravel shifting. "Jazz," Jake responded, shoving the papers aside. "Come in." Jazz sauntered in, his boots silent on the planks. He surveyed the chaos, the scattered documents, the worried lines etched on Jake's brow, the thick tension, and no explanation needed. Everyone in Harmony Creek understood. "Heard about the sale," Jazz stated, his eyes unwavering. Jake exhaled heavily. "Yet it's real that I have to stop it. Find anything?" Jazz queried, gesturing towards the paperwork. Jake brandished the vet records and feed receipts. "Something, but I need it airtight. Sterling won't concede easily." Jazz contemplated this, brow furrowed. That man's got a mean streak, always sniffing out an angle to profit off someone else's misfortune. "He's trying to steal my ranch." Jazz, plain and simple. Jake raked a hand through his hair, frustration plain on his face. "We ain't letting that happen," Jazz declared, his voice resolute. "What can I do to help?" Jake leaned forward, meeting Jazz's gaze. "I need you to testify. Describe the care those horses receive. Emphasize they've never been neglected. Explain they're integral to this ranch." Jazz gave a slow nod. "I can do that. I've watched you raise them from spindly foals. They're practically family. I also need recent photos, Jazz, showing their health, their condition, showing them thriving here. Undeniable proof of their place." Jazz scratched at his stubble. "Got my old box camera in the truck. That IT ain't much, but it still clicks." "Perfect." Jake rose, a surge of resolve coursing through him. "Let's go. We have a ranch to document." They stepped out into the waning light. The air, now crisper, carried the earthy tang of hay and damp soil. Jake retrieved his own camera, a sleek digital model, from his truck that he'd use both, just to be certain. As they headed towards the pasture, Jake highlighted the details. The robust fencing, freshly repaired, the automatic watering stations brimming, the mineral supplements strategically placed. That he recorded it all. Reaching the pasture, they found the horses grazing serenely, their coats shimmering in the sundown glow. Jake approached, murmuring soft assurances. Recognizing his voice, they ambled to the fence, offering gentle nudges. He photographed them from every angle, capturing their strong bodies, their alert eyes, their relaxed postures. He focused on the telling details. The trimmed hooves, the lustrous manes and tails, the utter absence of any sign of mistreatment. Jazz worked alongside him, his antique camera whirring steadily. He captured similar scenes, but with a different perspective. He saw the deep connection between Jake and the animals, the unspoken language of mutual trust. He saw the ranch's very heart, beating strong as the sun slipped beneath the horizon, splashing the sky with vibrant hues. Jake snapped one final image. It was of Jazz, leaning on the fence, his face a study in quiet determination. The horses gathered around him, their heads resting on his shoulder. It was an image of Harmony Creek, an image of loyalty, an image of everything Jake was fighting to defend. Back in the barn, Jake scrutinized the images. They were compelling, undeniable. Alongside the vet records and feed bills, they composed a vivid portrait. The portrait of a rancher devoted to his horses, caring for them with every fiber of his being, but a portrait that utterly shattered Sterling's malicious claims. That he glanced at Jazz, carefully cleaning his camera. "Thanks, Jazz. This wouldn't have been possible without you." Jazz shrugged, a rare smile playing on his lips. "We're in this together, Sheriff. Always have been." Jake knew the battle ahead remained steep. Sterling was a formidable adversary, with deep pockets and a heart of stone. But studying the photos, buoyed by the support of his community, he knew he wasn't alone. He had evidence, he had allies, and he had the truth on his side. He could only pray it would be enough. The auction loomed, a deadline closing in like a trap. Time was dissolving fast. He had to get this evidence to Sarah, his attorney, and he had to do it now. That a fresh wave of adrenaline surged, that he wouldn't let Sterling steal his horses, that he wouldn't let him tear apart Harmony Creek. He would fight with everything he had. He would win, that he had no choice. Whispers of discontent. Sunbeams, thick with drifting particles, pierced the floral curtains in Martha Gable's parlor, to cloying fragrance. Lavender laced with the tang of medicinal lozenges permeated the air. Jake shifted on the chintz-covered sofa, its springs emitting a muted complaint. Opposite him, Martha followed his movements with the sharp, knowing gaze of a seasoned wren. "Well, Sheriff," she rasped, her voice a surprising rumble against her delicate frame. "You finally caught a whiff of the trouble brewing here in Harmony Glades. Took your sweet time." Jake managed a tired smile. "I just wanted to be a peacekeeper, Martha, not a revolutionary." "Humph," she retorted, setting her rocker into a steady rhythm. "That Sterling fellow doesn't allow for neutrality. Either you're with him, or you impede his progress. And trust me, a multitude of people find themselves in the latter category." He retrieved his notepad, the supple leather yielding under his touch. "That's what I'm trying to ascertain. Precisely who constitutes this multitude?" Martha emitted a dry, crackling laugh. "Now, that's a lengthy catalog. Where shall we commence? Perhaps with old Mr. Peterson, whom Sterling attempted to strong-arm into relinquishing his acreage for a paltry sum? Or maybe Mrs. Henderson, whose award-winning roses were deemed a visual blight and penalized in a near bankruptcy?" Jake began to jot notes. "Tell me about Peterson. Kind, unassuming soul. Tilled that soil since his father bequeathed it to him. Sterling coveted it for his planned golf resort. Offered him next to nothing, banking on Peterson's aversion to legal wrangling. When Peterson demurred, suddenly came complaints of excessive noise, unauthorized structures, the whole charade. Drove the poor man to the brink. Did he capitulate? Eventually. Yes, did he succumb to the pressure? Said he couldn't endure the unrelenting harassment. Relocated to Albuquerque with his daughter. It pains me every time I recall it." Martha's gaze drifted to the window, a shadow of melancholy dimming her eyes. Jake paused, pen poised above the page. "And Mrs. Henderson? Ah, Elsie, a woman of spirit. Her roses were her crowning achievement. Sterling's HOA declared them incompatible with the approved color scheme. Imagine, roses in a garden. They levied fines so exorbitant she nearly forfeited her home. She resisted with admirable grit, circulated petitions, spoke vehemently at every HOA assembly. But Sterling, that man just flashed his unctuous smile and continued escalating the penalties. What became of her? She remains, but she was compelled to sell a significant portion of her property to settle the debts. She no longer tends the roses, says the sight of them, and her inability to care for them properly, is too agonizing. Martha's rocking intensified, the cadence of its squeak filling the void. Jake felt a constriction in his gut. This wasn't simply about his horses. It was a strategy, a calculated draining of vitality from Harmony Creek. Did anyone ever legally challenge the HOA's authority? Martha offered another mirthless chuckle. A few brave souls. But Sterling commands legal talent capable of arguing the sky is lime green and prevailing, that he employs delaying tactics, overwhelms opponents with paperwork. Most lack the resources to withstand him. What about evidence? Was any of this harassment documented? Some attempted to do so, but Sterling possesses a knack for making inconvenient facts vanish. Records disappear, witnesses suffer sudden lapses in memory. It's akin to battling an intangible force. She leaned closer, her voice descending to a hushed tone. And never underestimate his network of informants. You never know who is reporting back to him. A chill snaked down Jake's spine. The feeling of surveillance, previously dismissed as paranoia, took on a chilling credibility. "Do you believe he orchestrated the theft of my horses?" Martha shrugged. a gesture freighted with implication. He's certainly capable of such actions. It's a convenient method of applying pressure. Wouldn't you agree? To portray you as incapable of caring for your animals aligns with his modus operandi. He thought of the veterinary reports, the feed bills, Jazz's testimony, all the support he was diligently amassing. Sterling seemed intent on branding him as derelict, unfit. He's attempting to force me off my land. He's attempting to displace anyone who doesn't conform to his ideal. Martha corrected, her voice hardening. He envisions Harmony Creek as nothing but sterile lawns and generic houses, all under his dominion. Jake closed his notebook, its weight feeling disproportionate. He regarded Martha, her keen eyes reflecting a lifetime of observing and interpreting the subtleties of Harmony Creek. Why are you divulging all this, Martha? It can't be easy to oppose someone of Sterling's stature. A spark of something akin to ire flickered within her gaze. Because someone must. Because if we fail to resist him, he will prevail, and I refuse to allow him to transform Harmony Creek into a barren wasteland. She paused, her gaze softening slightly. Besides, Sheriff, you're one of us. Always have been, and we look after our own. He rose to his feet, the chintz sofa groaning its relief. Thank you, Martha, that you've given me a significant amount to contemplate. Don't merely contemplate, Sheriff, she urged, her voice regaining its gravelly edge. Act before it's too late. Outside, the afternoon sun seemed less ardent, the air less fragrant. The pristine lawns of Harmony Glades stretched into the distance, each blade a miniature soldier in Sterling's army. As he drove toward his ranch, Jake replayed Martha's words. A strategy, a conspiracy, informants at every turn. He glanced in the rearview mirror, a sudden disquiet prickling at the back of his neck. That a black sedan, its windows darkly tinted, had been following him for several miles that he couldn't swear to it. But there was something deliberate about its presence. He depressed the accelerator, the truck rumbling to life. He wasn't merely fighting for his horses any longer. He was fighting for the very heart of Harmony Creek, and he sensed that the battle had only just commenced. Following the money, Jake sank into his worn office chair, the combined aroma of aged leather and day-old coffee a constant companion. Piles of HOA ledgers loomed on his desk, a precarious Everest of fiscal minutiae threatening to spill onto the scarred surface beneath. He massaged the grit from his eyes, the sheriff's office's buzzing fluorescence amplifying the throbbing in his temples. Anything surface, Sheriff? Deputy Miller asked, eagerness lacing his tone. Fresh from the academy, Roy was a keen learner, currently navigating the complexities of his role as Jake's overwhelmed second-in-command on this discreet inquiry. Just a paper blizzard, Jake sighed, riffling through the invoices and reports. More bureaucratic entanglement than a tumbleweed convention. He paused at a Harmony Blooms invoice for Common Area Enhancement, Deluxe Tier. The price tag seemed excessive for the scattering of petunias adorning the Harmony Glades entry. He nudged it aside, a tiny signal flag of suspicion twitching in his gut. Martha pegged it. Jake murmured, more to himself. Sterling's fingers are laced in it all. Sterling. Miller's brow creased. That's Mr. Sterling from Harmony Glades? Met him at the market last week. Seemed like such a pillar. Jake gave a dry chuckle, devoid of mirth. Appearances are unreliable, Roy, particularly around here. He indicated the encroaching stacks. We need to probe deeper, track where this money's actually flowing. Understood, Sheriff, Miller said, his chest swelling slightly. What are my orders? Start with these invoices, Jake instructed, passing over a batch. Reconcile them with actual work done. Flag anything that smells fishy, and Roy, he added, gentling his tone, tread lightly. We don't want Sterling getting wind of this. Miller nodded solemnly, claiming his stack and retreating to his remarkably organized desk. The rhythmic clatter of Miller's keyboard filled the space, punctuated by occasional sighs of frustration. Jake returned to his own mountain, his focus tightening as he pored over bank statements and budget summaries. Something about the HOA's financial management felt askew. Years of balancing his own ranch books had honed his nose for creative accounting. his attention snagged on a string of payments, labeled consultancy fees. The sums were significant, remitted to a firm called Sunrise Solutions, ostensibly headquartered out of state. Jake summoned the company on a screen. The website was a template of generic filler, awash in stock photography, and vague pronouncements about synergistic strategies. No staff listed, no address beyond a Delaware P.O. box. A klaxon of alarm blared in Jake's mind. "Roy," Jake called out, "dig into this Sunrise Solutions outfit. See if you can unearth anything solid. Anything at all." Miller, still battling the landscaping bills, glanced up, a slight pallor washing over his face. "Copy that, Sheriff." His fingers danced across the keys. Hours slipped by. The afternoon sun stretched long shadows across the room. Miller had validated Harmony Bloom's services at Harmony Glades, albeit at a 20% markup. Jake, meanwhile, had unearthed more suspect consulting fees, all directed to phantom corporations lacking any traceable operations. "Sheriff," Miller's voice was low, "I'm hitting a wall with Sunrise Solutions. Just a website and a mailbox. And oh, flesh and blood. No brick and mortar. They're practically invisible." "That confirms my suspicions," Jake said, his jaw hardening. "Looks like we've stumbled on a phantom company." He leaned back, tinting his fingers before his face. This extended past inflated grass, cutting and restrictive HOA rules. This reeked of outright fraud, possibly embezzlement. And if Sterling was orchestrating it, he was dancing with the devil. "Roy, I need you to pull every HOA financial document from the last half-decade," Jay commanded. "The whole shebang. Bank records, invoices, expenditure reports, meeting notes, everything." Miller's eyes widened slightly. "That's the substantial request, Sheriff." "I know," Jake replied grimly. "But we need to get a complete panorama of what's unfolding here, that we have to follow the paper trail." The next days dissolved into a haze of paperwork, late nights, and bottomless coffee. The sheriff's office morphed into an impromptu forensic accounting hub, with paper stacks colonizing every free space. Miller, shedding his initial hesitation, blossomed into a surprisingly meticulous investigator, painstakingly cross-referencing data and signaling inconsistencies. They unearthed a pattern of questionable dealings: payments to contractors for uncompleted projects, inflated invoices for grossly overpriced services, and transfers into offshore accounts cloaked in anonymity. The evidence coalesced, revealing a methodical scheme to bleed the HOA dry. One evening, while plowing through a particularly dense stack of bank records, Miller pointed to a series of withdrawals tagged community event allocations. "Sheriff," he noted, "these community event expenses seem disproportionately high, and they all cluster right before HOA elections." Jake scrutinized the transactions. The sums were considerable, each several $1,000s, allegedly spent on catering, entertainment, and event decor. But the descriptions were nebulous, and there were no supporting invoices or proof of purchase. "Cross-reference these vendors," Jake instructed. "Check if they actually exist and whether they've ever provided services to the HOA." Miller nodded, his fingers flying. Moments later, he looked up, his expression troubled. "Sheriff, 2 of these vendors share an address. It's an empty lot on the town's periphery." Jake swore softly. This constituted the irrefutable evidence. Sterling wasn't merely siphoning HOA funds. He was exploiting them to rig elections, solidifying his grip on the community. "We have sufficient grounds," Jake said, his voice edged with steel. "We need to brief the district attorney." Miller hesitated. "Sheriff, are you certain? This promises to be a major battle. Sterling wields considerable influence." "I know," Jake said, rising and stretching his aching muscles. "But we can't allow him to continue this charade. This extends beyond my horses now. Roy, this involves defending the residents of Harmony Creek from a man eager to exploit and manipulate them for personal enrichment." He met Miller's gaze, his resolve unwavering. "We're going to bring him down? Roy, we're going to deliver justice." Miller nodded, his initial trepidation replaced by a burgeoning purpose. "Affirmative, Sheriff. Let's do it." The humming fluorescence cast a harsh glow upon the mountains of documentation, representing the culmination of their relentless endeavor. Jake understood the path ahead would be arduous and long, but he stood prepared for the conflict. He possessed the evidence, the backing of his community, and the unwavering force of justice on his side. And that, he considered, was all he needed. He paused for a moment, picturing the undulations of his ranch land, the comforting sound of his horses grazing contentedly in the pasture, that he wouldn't permit Sterling to steal that from him, that he wouldn't permit him to steal it from anyone else in Harmony Creek. Showdown at the auction. The air buzzed with a disquiet that transcended the summer swelter. To the edge of Harmony Glade's pristine common, a makeshift corral marred the landscape, its rough-hewn timbers a jarring note against the cultivated green. Half a dozen horses shuffled nervously, their bewilderment palpable, that Jake's gaze snagged on the familiar white markings of Belle, his mare, and the regal bearing of Buster, his gelding. Bile rose in his throat, a stark contrast to the cool professionalism he struggled to maintain. His uniform was a calculated choice. The sharp creases of his deputy shirt, the glint of his polished star under the harsh sun, the substantial weight of his duty belt, each element broadcasted a clear message. He wasn't just Jake Caldwell, the rancher. He was the long arm of the law, and the law had queries. The murmur of the crowd, a motley assortment of gawkers, bargain seekers, and self-satisfied HOA members, quieted as he drew closer. Conversations faltered and stilled, replaced by the uneasy scrape of shoes and the crinkle of programs. Sterling Mayfield, adorned in a linen suit that seemed absurdly out of place, stood beside the auctioneer, his smile strained and unnatural. Sheriff Caldwell, Mayfield greeted, his voice echoing with artificial enthusiasm. A surprise. Here to admire our community's commitment to addressing property matters? Jake's eyes roved across the penned horses, lingering on Belle's plaintive wicker, before returning to Mayfield. Simply here to ensure the auction is conducted legally, Mr. Mayfield. The ensuing silence hung heavy and oppressive. He felt eyes boring into him. Scrutinizing his every move, he remained focused, his attention solely on Mayfield. The auctioneer, a lean figure with a booming voice honed by years of practice, cleared his throat, a nervous habit. All right, everyone, let's kick things off. We have some excellent animals here today, seeking a new pasture. His usual fervor seemed diminished, subdued by the palpable tension that a camera flash erupted. Bren O'Malley, her camera a natural extension of her hand, sliced through the crowd. Her auburn hair was bound in a utilitarian ponytail, and her keen eyes flicked between Jake and Mayfield. Dressed in denim, she was clearly ready for action. Sheriff Caldwell, she called out, her voice cutting through the quiet. Any comment on the questionable circumstances surrounding this auction? The speed at which these horses were deemed abandoned is certainly raising eyebrows. Mayfield's grin tightened into a grimace. Ms. O'Malley, he said, his tone laced with disdain. Always a pleasure. Perhaps you could direct your journalistic energies toward the positive aspects of Harmony Glades, our thriving community, our dedication to upholding property values. Bren ignored him, her gaze unwavering on Jake. Sheriff, she pressed, relentless. Jake strode toward the auction pen, dust swirling beneath his boots. I'm investigating the events that led to this auction, he declared, his voice resonant and unwavering. Specifically, the abandonment claims put forth by the Harmony Glades HOA. A ripple of unease spread through the onlookers that a crimson flush crept up Mayfield's neck. Sheriff, Mayfield said, his voice strained and thin. I can assure you, we have operated within the bounds of the law. All procedures were meticulously followed. This is simply a matter of responsible community governance. Is it now, Mr. Mayfield? Bren interjected, snapping another photo of Mayfield's visible discomfort. Because I've heard whispers of irregularities in the HOA's notification protocols and some rather creative accounting. Wouldn't you agree? Mayfield spun on her, his eyes blazing with fury. Ms. O'Malley, I will not tolerate these baseless slanders. This is a private gathering, and your presence is disruptive. Disruptive? Bren arched an eyebrow. Or are you just hoping to keep certain uncomfortable truths concealed, Mr. Mayfield? She closed the distance between them, the shutter clicking. Tell me, Mr. Mayfield, about Sunrise Solutions. A curious entity. Seems to perform minimal labor, yet receives substantial remuneration from the HOA. Jake observed, a flicker of satisfaction warming him. Bryn was a force to be reckoned with, possessing an uncanny ability to sniff out a story. Some were put off by her style, but Jake valued her blunt honesty. Mayfield sputtered, his carefully constructed facade crumbling. This is an outrage. I demand that you vacate this property at once. I believe I'm standing on public land, Mr. Mayfield, Bryn retorted, gesturing towards the common area. And I am merely seeking information, the kind the residents of Harmony Creek are entitled to receive. The auctioneer, sensing the imminent collapse of the proceedings, wrung his hands in agitation. Perhaps we should defer the auction, he stammered, the words barely audible. Defer? Mayfield rounded on him, his features contorted in disbelief. Absolutely not. We will proceed as planned. But the tide had turned. The crowd, initially drawn by the prospect of a bargain, now regarded the scene with growing trepidation. The jovial atmosphere had dissipated, replaced by an undercurrent of suspicion and distrust. Jake advanced, his gaze locking with Mayfield's. Mr. Mayfield, he stated, his voice calm but firm. I will require access to all records pertaining to the seizure and impending sale of these horses. The complete file, and I need it now. Mayfield's jaw clenched. He understood that he was losing control. His eyes darted around, shifting from Jake to Bryn, to the increasingly hostile expressions in the crowd. He felt trapped like a cornered animal. This is harassment, Sheriff, he said, his voice trembling almost imperceptibly. I have rights. As do the people of Harmony Creek, Mr. Mayfield, Jake countered, and they have the right to understand what's happening in their community. He indicated the horses with a nod, starting with the circumstances that resulted in these animals being confined in that pen. The sun blazed relentlessly, its heat amplifying the already volatile atmosphere. The horses stirred restlessly in the pen, sensing the rising tension. Bryn continued to photograph, meticulously documenting every detail. The standoff at the auction was fully underway, challenging authority. The air thrummed with ill-concealed hostility. Sterling, his features arranged in a delicate performance of disdain, advanced. The PA system he'd commandeered amplified his words, turning the impromptu town meeting, supposedly about concerns surrounding the horse auction, into a stage for personal conflict. Sheriff Caldwell, Sterling began, his tone sugared with sarcasm. You seem to have forgotten your role. You are a keeper of the peace, not a lone wolf bearing a vendetta. A ripple of unease spread through the crowd. Faces, previously creased with bewilderment and worry, swiveled toward Jake, seeking his response. Immovable, the sun caught the gleam of his badge. He remained planted, awaiting the next volley. You've levied grave accusations against the Harmony Glades HOA. Sterling pressed, his voice gaining an edge. Accusations of, what was it again, Sheriff? Equine larceny, deceit, a cabal, all presented without a scintilla of proof, I might add. Simply the grumblings of a cattleman inconvenienced. Sterling let cattleman linger. Deliberate insult, he scanned the assembly, soliciting approval. Some nodded, captivated by his urbane presentation and the promise of advancement he embodied. Others remained unconvinced, their allegiance to Jake and Harmony Creek's heritage unwavering. Perhaps, Sterling continued, now feigning concern, his voice almost silken, the sheriff is allowing personal grievances to color his judgment. After all, disrupting this sale benefits him directly, wouldn't you? Agree, Sheriff? Isn't this a bald-faced abuse of power? Jake's voice, when it came, was calm and even, a counterpoint to Sterling's bluster. I'm not obstructing an auction, Mr. Mayfield. I'm investigating unusual circumstances regarding supposedly abandoned livestock. Abandoned? Sterling scoffed with incredulity. These creatures were unkempt, neglected. Their owner, if one could call them that, was clearly incapable of proper stewardship. He gestured towards enlarged photographs on easels. Images taken before Jake had a chance to rehabilitate the animals, their coats dull with dust, their ribs visible souvenirs of the long journey. Jake's jaw tightened, but his tone remained measured. Those images were captured on the open range before I'd even brought them in. They'd been free roaming. They weren't cast aside. They were cared for in their own way. Cared for? Sterling echoed, dripping with derision. Is that your professional opinion, Sheriff? You maintain that allowing wild horses to run rampant constitutes conscientious ownership. It constitutes a life they know, a life I wasn't given a chance to improve before this auction was set. Jake stepped forward, his gaze encompassing the crowd. I understand the need for evolution. I understand the longing to better our town, but not at the cost of our history, not at the cost of integrity. He retrieved a thick, well-worn folder from his jacket. These are the registration documents for each animal, dated, signed, and legally verified. They establish ownership. They establish they're the property of Caldwell Ranch. He brandished the folder, the sun illuminating the official seals with undeniable validity. A sterling smile wavered, his facade of composure developing fissures. Documents can be falsified, Sheriff, or misplaced. They are far from definitive. Perhaps, Jake conceded, his voice deceptively gentle. But these also contain veterinary records, immunization schedules, deworming dates, farrier invoices, every detail documented, every expense covered by Caldwell Ranch. They might not be pampered show animals, but they receive excellent care. He produced a second, equally substantial folder. Martha, a woman who had lived in Harmony Creek for decades, broke the silence. I've seen Jake with his horses. He's been working with them for years. Calls each of them by name. Another voice chimed in. Billy, who worked at the local feed store, said he always buys the top-grade feed. Never cuts corners. Sterling's carefully constructed narrative began to crumble. He could feel the alteration in the crowd, the rising discomfort with his strong-arm tactics. He needed to wrest back the narrative, quickly. Circumstantial evidence, people, he thundered, his voice regaining its bite. This is all word of mouth that we need facts. And the fact remains, Sheriff Caldwell has a vested interest in derailing this sale, that he's trying to manipulate the situation for personal enrichment. My enrichment is protecting what's mine and upholding justice, Jake retorted, his gaze locking with Sterling's. These animals are more than just merchandise. They're my family, a piece of our collective story, and I will not stand idly by while they're sold off to the highest bidder based on fabrications. Jake opened the second folder, extracting a series of photographs. These differed starkly from Sterling's. These presented Jake amongst his horses, nursing them, training them. Images of a man intimately familiar with his animals, close-ups showcased trimmed hooves and coats gleaming with health. He spread them across a table, inviting inspection. These were captured last week, Mr. Mayfield, after I had gathered them in from the range, before you conveniently labeled them abandoned. The crowd pressed forward, straining for a better view. Whispers turned to soft pronouncements, then to open conversation. The diligently crafted illusion of Jake as a neglectful rancher was dissolving before their very eyes. The man with a weather-beaten face and a demeanor of suspicion voiced, Sterling, those horses look pretty rough out on the range. I saw them myself. Maybe Jake was letting him run a bit too wild. A woman beside him parried, but he's got the papers. Vet reports he's caring for him now. Maybe he just needed some time. The crowd stood divided. Some were swayed by the evidence Jake had revealed, by the testimony of their neighbors, by their own memories of observing Jake collaborating with the horses over the years. Others remained loyal to Sterling, seduced by his vision of progress and wealth, reluctant to contest the authority of the HOA. The tension was palpable. Sterling, perceiving the shift, marshaled one last effort to salvage his position. Even if these horses do belong to Sheriff Caldwell, he pronounced, his voice ringing with forced conviction, it does not alter the truth that they were an eyesore on the community. Neglected, free roaming, a hazard to traffic. The HOA has a duty to maintain property values, to ensure the safety and well-being of our residents. The HOA's duty is to serve the town, not control it, Jake countered, his voice rising above the din, and that encompasses respecting our traditions, respecting our way of life, that we can foster advancement without sacrificing our history. We can enjoy development without obliterating what renders Harmony Creek unique. He surveyed the attendees, locking eyes with each individual. This is not merely about horses. It's about the kind of community we aspire to create. Point 1, where history holds worth, or 1 where capital reigns supreme. The restraining order. A palpable tension, thick enough to taste, filled the air, the kind that portends a coming storm. Jake, still holding the documents, stood amidst the hushed murmurs of the crowd, a low thrum beneath the surface. Sterling, his face flushed a furious red, blustered, "This is absurd. A mere delaying tactic. I demand we proceed." Before a second could validate his motion, a wave of astonishment swept through the gathered townsfolk. Sarah Jenkins, briefcase firm in her grip, advanced through the throng. The sharp tap of her heels on the makeshift wooden stage Sterling had erected echoed like tiny declarations of war against the developer's carefully crafted charade. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah announced, her voice ringing clear and strong, slicing through Sterling's ranting. "I am Sarah Jenkins, representing Sheriff Jake Caldwell. I hold in my hand a temporary restraining order duly signed and sealed by Judge Thompson this very morning. This auction is suspended, effective immediately." She presented the document, its official seal catching the sharp afternoon light. The murmurs intensified, swirling into a bewildered clamor. Sterling looked as if he'd bitten into something profoundly sour, his face twisting in disbelief and rage. "This is an outrage," he bellowed, cords standing out on his neck. "On what basis? That derelict abandoned those creatures. He is unfit." Sarah remained unmoved. "The restraining order is based on compelling evidence submitted to the court, substantiating Sheriff Caldwell's ownership of the horses and questioning the legality of these proceedings. Moreover," she continued, her gaze laser-focused on Sterling, "it addresses potential infringements on property rights and due process." Jake watched the tableau unfold, a quiet satisfaction blooming within him. Sarah was a force, a tempest of legal prowess and unwavering conviction that he knew this was merely the opening volley, but a crucial one. The restraining order afforded him breathing room. Time to amass further proof, to expose Sterling's designs, to galvanize the community. Momentarily silenced, Sterling sought support from Agnes Plumtree, his lieutenant in the HOA. Agnes, however, appeared wan and unsettled, her meticulously sculpted hairstyle slightly askew. She fidgeted with her hands, her eyes darting nervously about the crowd. The assured, ambitious woman who had so readily endorsed Sterling's plan seemed diminished, replaced by someone uncertain and apprehensive. "Richard," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rising din. "What does this signify? What comes next?" Sterling snapped at her, his tone a venomous undertone. "It signifies nothing. A trivial setback, that a legal nicety that will appeal, that will exploit some loophole, that don't trouble yourself with it." He pasted on a smile, but his eyes remained cold. Agnes remained unconvinced. The vision of the future she had eagerly anticipated, a future of elevated social standing, acceptance within Harmony Glade's upper crust, perhaps even a spot on the HOA board, seemed to evaporate before her. The restraining order wasn't simply a paper. It represented a potential chasm in the carefully constructed ascent she was attempting. "But Richard," she pressed, her voice trembling ever so slightly. "What if what? If he's correct? What if we have erred?" All the papers he brandished, and now this order. Sterling seized her arm, his grasp surprisingly fierce. "Don't be absurd, Agnes. He's bluffing. Try to cow us. We're on the right side here. Progress necessitates casualties, and those bumpkins need to recognize that." Releasing her abruptly, he redirected his attention to Jake and Sarah as he inflated his chest, attempting to regain his composure. "Very well, Sheriff Caldwell," Sterling declared, his voice laced with contempt. "You have succeeded in delaying the inevitable. But do not imagine for an instant that this alters anything, that we will proceed with this auction. Eventually. Mark my words." He spun on his heel and strode off the stage, leaving Agnes standing alone. appearing lost and vulnerable. The crowd began to dissipate, the initial fervor yielding to a subdued buzz of conjecture. Some lingered, casting curious glances at Jake and Sarah, while others offered words of encouragement. As Jake watched Sterling vanish into the throng, a wave of resolve surged within him. The fight was far from concluded, but he had secured a vital victory that he approached Sarah, extending his hand. "Thank you, Sarah. I am not sure how I would have managed this without you." Sarah smiled, a genuine warmth lighting her eyes. "Think nothing of it, Jake. It's been my pleasure. This HOA is obviously exceeding its authority. Someone needed to challenge them." Agnes, observing them from the edge of the crowd, felt a sharp pang of envy. She had initially perceived Jake as an impediment, a vestige of the past hindering progress. But now, she beheld him differently. He possessed integrity, courage, and the unwavering support of his neighbors. Qualities she deeply yearned for, but increasingly seemed out of reach. She bit her lip, a surge of doubt assailing her. Had she made the wrong choice? Had she thrown her lot with the wrong side? The possibility gnawed at her, disrupting her carefully nurtured sense of self-assurance. As the sun began its descent, painting long shadows across the parched landscape, Jake turned his attention to those who lingered, offering a grateful nod. He knew a difficult journey lay ahead, but he also knew he was not alone. He had Sarah, his friends, and the steadfast spirit of Harmony Creek behind him. Agnes, however, felt more isolated than ever. The promises of prestige and acceptance that Sterling had dangled before her felt hollow, tainted by the growing suspicion that she had been exploited, manipulated into championing a cause in which she no longer believed. The future she had meticulously mapped out was now obscured by uncertainty, leaving her adrift in a sea of doubt and regret. She glanced back at Jake and Sarah, their heads close in conversation, and then at Sterling, his retreating form radiating anger and resentment. The weight of her decisions pressed down on her, heavy and suffocating. With a sigh, Agnes Plumtree turned and walked away, the tap of her heels no longer sounding triumphant, but a mournful echo in the approaching darkness. The restraining order had halted more than just the auction. It had brought her carefully constructed ambitions to a standstill, leaving her to confront the ramifications of her ambition and the growing awareness that she had bartered her principles for a fleeting illusion of belonging. The price, she feared, might be steeper than she was prepared to pay. Defiance. A pulse hammered at Sterling's temple, a frantic tattoo beneath the bronze of his skin. The air after Sarah's declaration hung thick, a suffocating blanket woven with disbelief. The crowd's simmering resentment was almost palpable, a bitter tang on his tongue. He bit down hard, wrestling for composure. This was a betrayal of the plan. He smoothed the lapel of his bespoke suit, a brittle veneer of calm concealing the tempest inside. He wouldn't let Sarah Jenkins, this small-town lawyer, and that damn cowboy sheriff dismantle everything he'd built. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, the microphone amplifying the steely precision in his voice. "It seems there's been a slight complication, a frivolous attempt to obstruct these proceedings." He flicked a dismissive hand towards Sarah, his gaze a glacier. Sarah stood firm, her expression a study in restrained anger. "That's a court order, Mr. Mayfield. Proceeding constitutes contempt." Sterling's laugh was a dry rasp that scoured the auction grounds. "Contempt? Hardly. This concerns community enhancement, progress itself." And frankly, he dropped his voice, a dangerous spark igniting in his eyes. "I doubt a hastily procured injunction from some rural judge will impede that." He inflated his chest, surveying the assembly with arrogant assurance. "Now, let's not allow this minor detour to delay us further. We have magnificent horses to offer, animals destined for superior care within the esteemed families of Harmony Glades, rather than languishing in some ill-kept paddock." The final words carried a pointed sting aimed at Jake and his ranch. A low murmur stirred through the crowd. Some faces remained masks of allegiance, devoted to the HOA's promises of manicured perfection. Others, however, betrayed a flicker of unease, their gazes shuttling between Sterling and Sarah, uncertain of their footing. Even Agnes Plumtree, usually ramrod straight, looked wan and unsettled near the front. Mr. Mayfield, I must insist, Sarah's voice sliced through the rising tide of sound, unwavering and keen. Ignoring a court directive carries severe penalties. Sterling brushed past her objection as though it were a bothersome insect. He pivoted toward the auctioneer, a man whose checkered shirt and cowboy hat couldn't mask his anxiety. The man stood paralyzed beside the makeshift stage. "Proceed," Sterling commanded, his tone leaving no room for debate. "Let's begin with that exquisite Palomino mare. A fine animal, wouldn't you agree?" He clapped the auctioneer on the shoulder, a gesture more menacing than friendly. The auctioneer gulped, his Adam's apple performing a frantic dance. His eyes darted between Sarah and Sterling, a landscape of fear etched upon his face that he cleared his throat, raising the gavel. "All right, folks, let's get this show underway. We have here a beautiful Palomino mare, a real stunner, who'll offer $5,000 to commence." His voice lacked its usual resonant confidence, wavering slightly. The crowd held its breath, and hands rose. The air vibrated with tension, heavier than the oppressive summer humidity. A few Harmony Glades residents exchanged worried glances. This flagrant disregard for the law was disquieting, even for those who embraced the HOA's vision. This felt different, more aggressive, more ruthless than they'd anticipated. A cold premonition slithered down Agnes Plumtree's spine. She had always upheld order, proper procedure, but this violated her deeply. Sterling was transgressing a line, not only defying the law but shredding the social contract of their community. She glanced at the horses, their eyes reflecting confusion and apprehension. She thought of Jay Caldwell, his quiet integrity and unwavering dedication to his land, that a wave of nausea threatened to overwhelm her. Sarah Jenkins cleaved through the stunned onlookers, her eyes blazing. She halted directly before Sterling, her voice low. "Dangerous current. You believe you're above the law, Mr. Mayfield, that you can simply disregard a court order because it displeases you." Sterling's smirk was a cold, hard facet of his composure. "The law is a device, Ms. Jenkins, and like any tool, it can be wielded to achieve a desired end, that I intend to use it to forge a brighter future for Harmony Creek. A future founded on deceit and stolen property?" Sarah shot back, her voice laced with disdain. "Progress demands sacrifice," Sterling replied smoothly, his gaze unwavering. "Occasionally, a few minor inconveniences are necessary to secure a greater good." He returned his focus to the auctioneer, who remained transfixed, clutching the gavel like a lifeline. "I said proceed," Sterling roared, his patience dissolving. The auctioneer flinched, his gaze searching the crowd. Begging for direction, he studied the Palomino mare, her coat gleaming in the sun, her tail swishing anxiously. He examined Sarah, her face a testament to resolve. He looked at Sterling, his features contorted in icy fury. He inhaled deeply and lifted his gavel. "All right, folks, $5,000 for this beautiful Palomino mare. Do I hear 5,000? Still, silence reigned. The crowd remained frozen, paralyzed between their fear of Sterling and their growing disgust with his methods. Then, a voice, clear and firm, pierced the silence. "I'll bid $1. All eyes swiveled toward the speaker. It was Old Man Hemlock, proprietor of the general store, a man of few words but considerable influence in Harmony Creek. He stood tall and unyielding, his weathered face etched with defiance. The collective gasp rippled through the onlookers. It was a challenge, a clear act of rebellion against Sterling's dominance. Sterling's face darkened to a thunderous hue. "Hemlock, I suggest you reconsider your actions. This is a serious undertaking." Old Man Hemlock spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the ground. "I've lived in Harmony Creek my whole life, Mayfield. Seen a lot of comings and goings, and I've never witnessed anyone try to bulldoze their way around like you're doing. That horse belongs to Jay Caldwell, and you know it." Another voice chimed in, this time from Martha, the baker, $1.01. Then another from Jed, the mechanic, $1.02. The bids began to trickle, a hesitant but building current of dissent. Each bid was a small act of defiance, a refusal to be cowed by Sterling's power. Sterling's face was now a canvas of rage. He balled his fists, his knuckles bone white. He felt control slipping through his fingers. The carefully constructed illusion of order and advancement was shattering around him. "Stop this," he bellowed, his voice cracking with fury. "Cease this ridiculous charade immediately." But the crowd would not be silenced. The bids continued their slow, steady climb, fueled by a shared sense of outrage and a burgeoning resolve to resist Sterling's tyranny. Agnes Plumtree watched in mesmerized silence, her heart pounding in her ears. The momentum had shifted. The community was uniting against Sterling's overreach. She recognized, with a sickening clarity, that she had committed a profound error. She had allied herself with the wrong person, the wrong cause, and now she was witnessing the devastating consequences of her choices. Arrest. The dollar bill trembled in Old Man Hemlock's gnarled hand, a silent rebellion echoing through the suddenly hushed auction grounds. Sterling Mayfield, his face a mask of barely contained fury, sputtered, "This is ridiculous. This auction will proceed as planned." Jake Caldwell stepped forward, the setting sun glinting off his badge he'd held back as long as he could, hoping Mayfield would stumble enough to self-destruct. But the man was too arrogant, too convinced of his own invincibility. "Mr. Mayfield," Jake's voice cut through the air, amplified by the microphone he'd clipped to his uniform, "I'm placing you under arrest." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Even Deputy Roy Miller, standing nervously at Jake's side, blinked in surprise. He hadn't been given the signal, hadn't anticipated this moment so soon. His hand instinctively went to the holster at his hip, fumbling for a reassuring touch. The Mayfield's carefully constructed facade cracked. "Arrest? On what charges? I'm running a perfectly legitimate auction." He gestured wildly at the penned horses, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. Dust swirled around his polished shoes, a stark contrast to the worn boots of the onlookers. "Contempt of court," Jake stated, his gaze unwavering. "Judge Jenkins issued a cease and desist order. You were served this morning. Continuing this auction is a direct violation of that order." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. An obstruction of justice, interfering with an ongoing investigation into the questionable seizure of these horses. Mayfield's face flushed crimson. "This is harassment. This is politically motivated." He jabbed a finger towards Jake. "You're abusing your power, Caldwell." Jake ignored the outburst. He glanced at Roy, who was still struggling to process the rapid turn of events. "Roy, read him his rights." Roy, snapping to attention, cleared his throat, his voice wavering slightly. "Why, yes, sir, Mr. Mayfield. You have the right to remain silent." He rushed through the Miranda rights, stumbling over a few words, but managing to convey the essential information. The crowd watched, transfixed, as the awkward ceremony unfolded. While Roy recited the rights, Jake reached for Mayfield's arm. The developer recoiled, pulling away. "Don't you dare touch me. Mr. Mayfield, I strongly suggest you cooperate," Jake said, his voice hardening. "Resisting arrest will only add to your list of charges." He could feel the tension radiating from the crowd, a mixture of anticipation and simmering anger that he needed to keep the situation under control. Mayfield, realizing he was losing control of the narrative, glared at Jake, then at the sea of faces surrounding him. He saw no sympathy, only a righteous indignation he hadn't anticipated. Agnes Plumtree, standing a few feet away, avoided his gaze, her expression unreadable that he was alone. With a defeated sigh, Mayfield relented. "Fine," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You win for now, Caldwell, but this isn't over." Jake nodded curtly. "Roy, cuff him." Roy, finally finding his footing, carefully placed the handcuffs on Mayfield's wrists. The metallic click echoed in the sudden silence, and as Jake led Mayfield away, a roar erupted from the crowd. Cheers, whistles, and shouts of support filled the air. Old Man Hemlock raised his dollar bill in triumph, a symbol of their collective defiance. "Thank you, Sheriff," someone yelled. About time, another voice boomed. Jake acknowledged the cheers with a nod. His focus on maintaining order, he could feel the weight of their expectations, the hope they placed in him to restore justice to Harmony Creek, that he turned to Roy. Roy, secure the scene, and one touches those horses. I want a perimeter established. And get someone down here to take inventory of the animals. We need to make sure they're properly cared for until we can sort this mess out. Roy, his earlier nervousness replaced with a newfound confidence, saluted. Yes, sir, Sheriff, I'm on it. He puffed out his chest. Eager to prove himself, he started barking orders to the other deputies, his voice firm and authoritative. Jake escorted Mayfield toward his patrol car. Sarah Jenkins approached, a triumphant smile on her face. Well done, Jake, she said, her voice filled with satisfaction. I knew you'd do the right thing. It was the only thing I could do, Sarah, Jake replied, glancing back at the chaotic scene. The auctioneer was scrambling to pack up his equipment, the potential bidders dispersing, their faces a mixture of relief and excitement. What happens now? Sarah asked. Now, Jake said, we start digging. We find out exactly how Mayfield managed to acquire these horses, and we make sure he pays for what he's done. He helped Mayfield into the back of the patrol car. The developers face a mask of simmering rage. Turning back to Sarah, Jake added, and we put an end to this HOA's reign of terror. He closed the car door, the slam echoing through the now quieting auction grounds. The dust settled, revealing a scene of both victory and uncertainty. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. Inside the patrol car, Mayfield seethed. You haven't won, Caldwell. You have no idea who you're messing with. I have connections, resources. Jake, sliding into the driver's seat, simply started the engine. He glanced at Mayfield in the rearview mirror, his expression unreadable. Harmony Creek has a way of taking care of its own, Mr. Mayfield, that you'll find that out soon enough. As a patrol car pulled away, leaving behind the abandoned auction grounds, a sense of hope began to bloom in Harmony Creek. The community had stood up to tyranny, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like justice might actually prevail. The $1 bid had become a symbol of resistance, a promise of a brighter future. The arrest signaled a turning point, a shift in power, and a renewed determination to reclaim their home. The fallout. Adrenaline coursed through Bren O'Malley. Snagging the sterling Mayfield story from the Harmony Creek Gazette's usual fare was a triumph, and now she was broadcasting live. The Gazette logo, a physical pressure against her face. The courthouse, a steadfast structure of brick, stood sentinel behind her. And so, in a shocking development, Sterling Mayfield, the engine behind Harmony Glades, was apprehended this afternoon, facing charges of contempt and obstruction. Sheriff J. Caldwell, seemingly unperturbed by Mayfield's previous menaces, personally executed the arrest after a flagrant violation of the court's decree regarding the disputed horse auction. That we await further details, but one thing is certain. The struggle for Harmony Creek has entered a treacherous new stage. Bren signaled the end of the broadcast, her exhale visible in the cooling air. At a thumbs up from the camera operator, already dismantling his gear, didn't quell the electric hum within her. This was more than just a headline. It was a fuse sputtering toward a powder keg. She needed answers, and she needed them now. News of Mayfield's detention ripped through Harmony Creek with the force of a sudden storm. IT began as hushed exchanges of the feed and seed, fueled by bulging eyes and furtive glances. Then, it spread like an infectious rumor to the diner, where Mabel, juggling burgers and flies, nearly incinerated a patty upon hearing the bulletin over the radio. By dusk, the town pulsed with a potent brew of incredulity, elation, and trepidation. Back at the Caldwell Ranch, a sense of measured triumph permeated the air. Jake, at the kitchen table, was enveloped in the comforting aroma of Brenda's apple pie. He scanned news reports on his laptop, his face etched with concern. It's exploding, Bren, he indicated the screen. Every major outlet is carrying it. Brenda's gaze sharpened as she perused the screen. Good. Let the whole damned world see what that snake's been peddling. Jake's sigh hung heavy in the air. It's not so simple. This will attract attention, a good chunk of it hostile. His prediction was already materializing. Comment sections erupted into battlegrounds of speculation, opinions flying with chaotic abandon. Some hailed Jake as a champion, a protector of the vulnerable. Others denounced him as an autocratic sheriff overstepping his bounds. And then there were the Harmony Glades residents, many staunchly loyal to Mayfield or quietly paralyzed by the potential impact on their property values. Across town, in his immaculately kept office, Councilman David Chun observed the unfolding media circus with growing unease. He raked a hand through his receding hairline, the measured cadence of his grandfather clock the only sound. The news showed Mayfield being escorted away, his expression a mask of controlled rage, a disastrous image. For Mayfield, and undoubtedly for Harmony Glades. Chun had initially championed the development. He envisioned it as a catalyst for the town's revival, injecting crucial revenue and attracting fresh blood. But lately, the accounts of aggressive HOA practices, the stories of families subjected to bullying and intimidation, had been preying on his mind. Now, with Mayfield's arrest, the entire venture stood on the precipice of collapse. His phone shrilled, the display revealing a prominent Harmony Glades address. Chun hesitated, then answered. David, the voice on the other end cut through the air, laced with panic. What in God's name is happening? My property value just tanked. I'm being bombarded with calls, everyone asking if we're all going to be wiped out. Chun pinched the bridge of his nose. I understand your concern, Margaret. I'm keeping a close watch on the situation. Watching, David, this is a catastrophe. We need to act. We need to sever ties with Mayfield. And fast. That's easier wish than done, Chun retorted, his voice strained. We're deeply integrated with Harmony Glades. Pulling out now could be even more ruinous. More ruinous than this? I doubt it. Mayfield has painted us all as villains. He's a criminal, David, and he's taking us all down with him. Margaret disconnected, leaving Chun staring at the instrument in his grasp. He pivoted in his chair, his gaze drifting to the glittering lights of Harmony Creek. The town he had pledged to serve was now wavering on the edge of ruin. He needed to take action, and with conviction. But what was the right course? Not since the accusations leveled against his own father had he felt so lost in the woods. He remembered the taste of isolation. Back at the Gazette, Bryn O'Malley pressed onward. She scoured property records, HOA minutes, and legal documents, seeking any hint of misconduct. She uncovered some anomalies, inconsistencies in the financial statements, suspect land acquisitions, and a trend of selective HOA enforcement that seemed to target those who opposed Mayfield. Circumstantial, yet tantalizing. She reached for her phone and punched in a number. Hey, it's Brenda. I need you to dig up some information for me. I'm after anything on Sterling Mayfield and Harmony Glades, specifically any connections to offshore accounts or dummy corporations. She terminated the call, her eyes fixed on a map of Harmony Creek. The town was small, but the stakes astronomical. This was about so much more than a developer being hauled off by the sheriff. It was about the heart of a community and the battle to safeguard it from those who would exploit it for personal enrichment. She appeared to be the only one who grasped the entirety of the picture. Later that evening, Councilman Chun found himself navigating the road to the Caldwell Ranch. The crunch of gravel announced his arrival. He parked and walked hesitantly toward the house, the porch light casting exaggerated shadows on the lawn. Jake answered, his expression guarded. Councilman Chun, what brings you here? Chun inhaled deeply. Sheriff, I think we need to have a word. He hesitated, his gaze veering toward Brenda, who stood just behind Jake. Alone. Jake nodded and ushered Chun inside, leading him to the parlor. Brenda lingered in the doorway, a glint of suspicion in her eyes, before retreating to the kitchen. Chun perched on the edge of the sofa, his hands clasped tightly. Sheriff, I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, he began, his voice raspy. But I need to be forthright. I'm developing serious misgivings about what's happening with Harmony Glades. Jake leaned back, his gaze unwavering. Misgivings, Councilman? That's a considerable understatement, wouldn't you say? Chun sighed. I threw my support behind the development, believing it would be a boon to the town. But I've witnessed Mayfield's methods. The pressure, the scare tactics, it's simply wrong. And the arrest? Jake inquired, a hint of skepticism in his tone. Is that what finally swayed you? Chin nodded slowly. That, and a tidal wave of public disapproval. The relentless negative press is harming the town, and I'm concerned about the ramifications in the long term. So, what's your next move? Jake asked, his tone challenging. Chun faltered. I haven't decided yet, but I'm open to suggestions. I'm prepared to weigh all available options. He looked up at Jake, a plea in his eyes. I only want what's best for Harmony Creek. Jake scrutinized Chun intently. Searching for any hint of duplicity, he detected only fatigue and a glimmer of authentic concern. All right, councilman, he acceded finally. Then let's talk. Unraveling the truth. Jake scowled at the monitor, the ledger entries blurring into a meaningless jumble that Mayfield's personal finances were a swamp, and the Harmony Glades HOA records, a full-blown toxic waste site. Ghost payments without invoices, suspiciously bloated landscaping bills, and hefty consultant payouts funneled to Nevada-based paper companies. Every click unearthed a new level of rot that he leaned back, the groan of his worn chair a familiar counterpoint to the growing discord in his gut. Roy, he called, the sound carrying through the mostly deserted precinct. Deputy Miller materialized in the doorway, a steaming thermos clutched in one hand. The hesitant demeanor from the investigation's early days was gone, replaced by a hardened gaze and a quiet self-assurance Jake appreciated. Sheriff, rip these names through the database. These outfits are listed as HOA vendors, but I'm betting they exist only on paper. Jake slid a printout across the desk. Roy's brow knit as he scanned the list. On it, Sheriff. He turned, then paused. Bryn O'Malley's here. Says she's got more intel on Mayfield's dealings. Jake sighed inwardly. He valued Bryn's drive, but solid evidence trumped conjecture any day. Send her in. Bryn practically vibrated into the room, her notepad already open, her eyes alight with purpose. Sheriff, I've been digging into Mayfield's history. Seems this isn't his first rodeo with questionable business practices. Back in Florida, there were murmurs of land grabs and strong-arm tactics, but nothing ever stuck to him. Jake tinted his fingers. Murmurs don't hold up in court, Bryn. I know, but I'm close to something tangible. I've got a contact in the county clerk's office pulling records. Apparently, there were hitches in the Harmony Glades rezoning permits. Something about sidestepping mandatory environmental assessments. That snagged Jake's attention. Circumventing environmental reviews could open a whole new can of worms, potentially exposing Mayfield to far graver charges. Keep at it, Bryn, and thanks. As Bryn exited, Roy returned, his expression thunderous. Sheriff, those companies? All mail drops. No real addresses, no legit business permits, purely fictitious. Damn, Jake breathed. He's been siphoning funds from the HOA, padding his pockets with the homeowner's money, and likely using it to bankroll his other ventures. Like the pilfered horses. What's our play, Sheriff? We freeze his assets, impound the HOA's financial records, and haul Mayfield back in for another round of questioning. This time, we're armed with ammunition. Meanwhile, at his palatial Harmony Glades estate, Sterling Mayfield was teetering on the brink. Word of the shell company discovery had reached him. A frantic call from his last remaining attorney, a quavering voice detailing subpoenas and looming indictments. He'd already dismissed the lawyer, a mere sacrificial lamb in his elaborate scheme that he stalled to study, the plush Persian rug absorbing the sound of his agitation. His private jet stood ready on the small Harmony Creek airstrip, fueled and prepped for immediate departure. A sizable sum had already been wired to an offshore account. He just needed to reach the airfield. His gaze drifted to a framed photo on his desk. Him clasping hands with a powerful senator, a symbol of his influence and clout. That influence, however, was evaporating. He had to vanish before the net tightened. He snatched a pre-packed suitcase, its leather softened by years of hasty getaways. Reaching the front door, he halted, a spark of fury igniting in his eyes. Caldwell. That man had single-handedly toppled his empire. He wouldn't let him walk away unscathed. He grabbed the phone and punched in a number. "It's me that I need a favor. Caldwell. Make him disappear." He slammed down the receiver, the cold calculation in his gaze betraying the panic bubbling beneath the surface. Back at the sheriff's station, Jake had just issued the order to freeze Mayfield's accounts when a call crackled over the radio from a rancher on the town's edge. "Sheriff, I just saw Mayfield's vehicle speeding towards the airfield. He's got luggage. Looks like he's making a run for it." Jake cursed under his breath. "Roy, grab your gear. We're heading to the airfield. Now." They screeched into the airfield, sirens wailing, tires kicking up dust and gravel as they skidded to a stop near the hangar where Mayfield's jet was parked. The engines were already screaming, the propellers a spinning vortex. Jake leaped from the patrol car, his hand hovering near his weapon. "Mayfield, stop that plane." Mayfield emerged from the cockpit, a contemptuous smirk plastered across his face. "Too late, Sheriff. I'm leaving this pathetic little bird in my rearview mirror." "You're not going anywhere, Mayfield. You're under arrest for embezzlement, fraud, and obstruction of justice. You can't prove anything." Mayfield yelled, his voice barely audible above the engine's deafening roar. He edged toward the plane, his hand reaching for the entry hatch. "Don't complicate things, Mayfield," Jake warned, his tone steady but resolute. Mayfield hesitated, his eyes flickering around, desperately seeking a loophole. Then, with a sudden surge of adrenaline, he bolted for the plane. Roy, anticipating the move, lunged, tackling him to the ground. Mayfield writhed, kicking and cursing, but Roy held him pinned. Jake approached, his expression grim. "Read him his rights, Roy." As Roy droned the Miranda warning, Jake stared down at Mayfield, crumpled on the asphalt. The arrogance had dissipated, replaced by raw, unadulterated desperation. "You can't do this," Mayfield shrieked. "I'll sue you. I'll own this town." Jake simply shook his head. "Harmony Creek isn't for sale, Mayfield, and neither is justice." They hoisted Mayfield to his feet and escorted him to the patrol CAS. They drove away. Jake glanced back at the private jet. Now silent and immobile, he knew this was only the opening act. Unearthing the complete truth would be a protracted and arduous process, but he was resolute in his commitment to see it through. Harmony Creek deserved no less. The setting sun splashed the sky with shades of coral and lavender. Jake knew that, despite the victory of the arrest, further challenges awaited. He had to not only prove Mayfield's offenses, but also safeguard the community from further harm. He was reminded of his father and grandfather, who had confronted similar struggles, fighting to defend their land and their traditions. He was a Caldwell, and he would not yield. Harmony restored. The storm hadn't ended. It had merely regrouped. The dust clouds sterling Mayfield's botched escape had stirred, only to settle with his capture, revealed a landscape primed for transformation. Yet, delivering on that promise of justice demanded more than a single arrest. The summons arrived before dawn, yanking Jake from uneasy slumber. Attorney General Amelia Hayes, crisp and businesslike. "Caldwell, I'm deploying a team to Harmony Creek immediately. Your complete cooperation is vital. We have cause to believe Mayfield's route extends throughout the Harmony Glades HOA, possibly infecting county government." Jake was already on his feet. "You'll have it, ma'am. I've been compiling evidence." Mayfield wasn't a lone wolf. He met Hayes' squad at the sheriff's department, a collection of steely-eyed investigators and forensic accountants. The air hummed with purpose. Harmony Creek became the epicenter of the inquiry. Subpoenas zipped around like angry hornets. Depositions echoed in the sterile rooms. HOA board members, developers, even a few county supervisors squirmed under the spotlight. The team meticulously unraveled the financial knots, uncovering a rat's nest of phantom companies, inflated bills, and blatant theft. As the investigation deepened, Harmony Glades underwent a metamorphosis. The haughty self-assurance that had once defined the community dissolved, leaving a residue of raw anxiety. Lawns languished, the meticulously sculpted flower beds withered, reflecting the crumbling facade of their fabricated paradise. The ubiquitous surveillance, once cherished, now felt like an oppressive blanket. Jake spent his days supporting the Attorney General's team, granting access to his files, acting as a local guide. But his mind kept wandering back to Thunderbolt and Willow. He missed the surge of Thunderbolt's muscles beneath him, the velvety brush of Willow's muzzle. The dam broke sooner than anticipated a young accountant. His conscience pricked, flipped, offering a detailed account of Mayfield's machinations, implicating key HOA figures. Bolstered by this confession, the Attorney General's team struck like lightning. Within 2 days, 3 more board members were apprehended, facing charges from fraud to conspiracy. With Mayfield and his cohorts caged, Jake could finally take a full breath. The vice squeezing his chest loosened. He knew the courtroom battles loomed, but the advantage had shifted. Harmony Creek could begin to mend. He saddled Dakota, his reliable Appaloosa, and rode to Mayfield Ranch. What had stood as a testament to Mayfield's ego now stood desolate, a monument to his downfall. Caution tape bisected the entrance to the main house. The once perfect lawns choked with weeds. He found Thunderbolt and Willow in a distant field, grazing without concern. They perked up as he neared, their eyes lighting with recognition. Thunderbolt offered a soft nicker, and Willow trotted towards him, tail flagging. Jake dismounted, his heart overflowing. He stroked Thunderbolt's soft nose. "Hey there, fella," he murmured. "Missed you badly." Thunderbolt nudged him, his breath warm on Jake's face. Willow leaned against his side, nosing his hand. He led them toward home, Dakota plodding behind. He could feel the tension draining away with each step. Reunited with his horses, a sense of completion washed over him, a wholeness he hadn't realized was missing. Back at the ranch, he spent the afternoon grooming Thunderbolt and Willow, coaxing a shine from their coats. He checked their hooves, laid out fresh hay, replenished their water tea, savored the familiar ritual, the comforting sights, sounds, and scents of the barn. Simultaneously, Harmony Glades began its own metamorphosis. With the old guard displaced, a new wave of residents emerged, committed to rebuilding their community on a bedrock of integrity. They organized town meetings, rewrote the HOA rules, and instituted rigorous financial oversight. The stifling atmosphere that had gripped the neighborhood began to disperse. Neighbors started reconnecting, fences were repaired, and the long-abandoned community garden was replanted with renewed vigor. The alteration wasn't instant, nor faultless. Some still clung to the old ways, resenting the upheaval, yearning for the era of HOA autocracy, but their voices were drowned out by a swelling chorus clamoring for a better, fairer community. That evening, Sarah found Jake on the porch, watching the sunset blaze across the horizon. Thunderbolt and Willow grazed in the pasture, their silhouettes sharp against the fading light. "They're magnificent, Jake," Sarah said, joining him. Jake smiled, drawing her close. "Sure are. Feels good to have them back where they belong." They lingered in silence, punctuated only by the crickets' evening song. Sarah rested her head on his shoulder. "Harmony Creek feels different," she whispered, "like it can finally breathe." "It can," Jake replied. "It won't be simple, but we're headed the right way." He paused. "Thanks for staying, Sarah, through all this mess." She squeezed his hand. "Wouldn't dream of going anywhere else. Like I said, I've put roots down here too." She tipped her head, looking into his eyes. "And I'm committed to you, Sheriff." He bent and kissed her, a long, lingering kiss that spoke volumes, a kiss of gratitude, of affection, and of hope blossoming as stars pricked the twilight sky. Jake knew the battle was far from won. There would be legal skirmishes, political maneuvering, and inevitable resistance from those who had grown fat on the old system. But he also knew that Harmony Creek had discovered its voice. The community had tasted liberation and wouldn't relinquish it easily. That he was no longer alone. He had Sarah by his side and the unwavering support of the people he had vowed to defend. Together, they could face whatever came next. The tranquility shattered as a distant coyote howled, the sound rippling through the valley. It was a reminder of the wild heart that still beat within Harmony Creek, a primal spirit that had always defined the community. Jake found the sound strangely comforting. He rose, drawing Sarah up with him. "Come on," he said. "Let's head inside. I think I've got some victory pie waiting in the fridge." As they strolled toward the house, hand in hand, Jake glanced back at the pasture. Thunderbolt and Willow stood together, dark outlines against the star-dusted sky. They were home, and so was he. The sentiment settled deep within, a sense of belonging he hadn't felt in years. Harmony Creek wasn't merely a place. It was woven into his very being, and he would do whatever was necessary to safeguard it. The investigation into the HOA's shady deeds was only beginning. But tonight, with Sarah near his, horses safe, and the community slowly healing, he allowed himself a moment's respite. Harmony, for now, had been restored. Yet he knew that maintaining it would demand unwavering vigilance, tireless dedication, and the courage to stand firm against those who sought to exploit it.